All right, here is what is most important, and you're going to see this in like almost every problem. The base and the height are always at a right angle. So I am even going to go as far as like highlighting that because that's super important. Because what in a lot of problems, what you're going to do is circle that right angle, which that's an 8, and I kind of covered that up. So that's an 8, and that's an 8.4. Because in Delta Math, there is a lot of extra information that you do not need, and you need to be able to sift through that, get rid of the stuff you don't need, and plug in the stuff that you do need. So area equals base times height. Your base and your height are going to be perpendicular. It says always at a right angle. So I would highly suggest circling your right angle and then finding the two sides that touch that right angle that you've circled. And so my base is going to be 8. My height is going to be 8.4. So it's going to be 8 times 8.4. And you get 67.2. And that's it. But here's the problem. If you're looking at this problem and you're like, oh my gosh, there's 5 numbers and I only need 2 of them, and you can't figure out how to figure out like which 2 they are, it gets really confusing. But if you see, oh, I just need to find the 2 sides that are connected to the right angle, it becomes a lot easier. Okay? So let's move on. Oh yes, this is for a parallelogram, a rectangle, and a square. So any of these shapes, this formula will work for. All right? All right, rhombus and kite. So either a rhombus or a kite. I think all of these examples are actually rhombuses, but it works for kites as well. And you basically take the diagonals and you divide them by 2. Which is the same as multiplying by 1/2. Multiply the diagonals, divide by 2. Okay, what does that look like? Well, if it's something like this, where your diagonals are split in half, you actually have to add those numbers together. It's like, yeah, one of your diagonals is going to be 12. One of your diagonals is going to be 8. And then you're going to divide all of those things by 2. So one way you could do it is like this, 12 times 8 divided by 2. The problem is if that ends up not being a whole number, it won't give you a decimal answer. So I prefer to do 12 times 8 and then divide the whole thing by 2. But, you know, you're going to get the same thing. Either way, it's going to be 48. All right, what if it gives you a problem like this and you're like, oh, why are there so many numbers out here on the outside? All the sides are the same. What that shows you is that it is a rhombus. But what you actually need are these 2. You have been given WY, which is 7.6. So like this one is 7.6. If you want to like point to that, if you don't have a highlighter, that's fine. 15.1 is going to be that one. But you just take 7.6 times 15.1, multiply them, and you divide by 2. 7.6 times 15.1. So it's really just figuring out which formula to use and using the correct one. Another thing, oh yes, I need to be writing these down, and I have not been doing a good job of it. This is inches squared. I don't think you have to type that in for delta. I just want you to make sure you know what area is. Like this is 48 inches squared, meaning there is 48 little 1 by 1 inch boxes that are within this rhombus. There are 57.38 1 inch boxes that are within this rhombus. That's what it's telling you. All right, let's look at this one, trapezoid. This one is by far the most challenging one, okay? Why is it confusing? Because there's 3 numbers, but it gives you 5. So here are my 3 numbers. So height and bases, they are still at a right angle. Height and bases are still perpendicular to each other. So find that right angle and circle it. And then there's 3 lines that touch this line. This is your height. And then these 2 are the bases. So you actually do not need those 2. So I'm just going to automatically cross those out. All right, I'm going to cross those out. And then I'm going to plug these things in. So I have 1/2 times the height, which is 14.4. How do I know that that's the height? Because the height is the one thing that touches the 2 bases. The height is perpendicular to the bases. There's 2 bases, and there's 1 height for a trapezoid. Then I'm going to put my parentheses, and I'm going to add my bases together. So 7.2 plus 14.4. Where are these coming from? That is wrong. Don't write that down. Pause. I looked at 26.4, but then wrote the wrong thing. 26.4. So just make sure that's correct. I'm going to pause for a second and give you guys a chance to write that. Things that students have found helpful in the past. Sometimes people like to, instead of writing 1/2, what is that as a decimal? Yeah, a lot of people just like to write 0.5 instead, which I honestly think is easier as well. I like to do 0.5 times the height, and then put your parentheses, just like we have it written, 7.2 plus 26.4. Yeah, 241.92. Pay attention to what, if it wants you to round, but for this, I'm just going to put that in there. So this would be the same as if you wrote 1/2 here. I don't know what it would end up. So let's say we did that. You're going to get the same thing. Okay, so it's literally just personal preference. Like, you're going to get the same thing whether you put 1/2 or 0.5. I don't care what you do. But, yeah. That's how we do it. Alright, and then what I'm going to do is pause my screen right now. Remember, you can cross them out. I'm actually not even going to cross them out for you because I want you guys to find an answer to this one. I'm going to pause. Alright, so we cross these 2 out. This is how it gets set up. Okay. So type these numbers in. I'm going to give you a chance. If you didn't get a chance to put that in a calculator, I would highly suggest doing it right now so that you don't miss this and don't know how to type it into the calculator, because you're going to have to know how to do these problems. Moving on to triangles. So it's the same idea. The base and the height are perpendicular. These are perpendicular still. They're always perpendicular. It's like it's not different for different shapes. Base and the height are perpendicular no matter what. There's 2 ways to write this formula. Either base times height divided by 2 or 1/2 times base times height. It's like the same thing. It's just different ways to write it. Okay. Look at number 4. It's kind of weird. Well, actually, let's do number 5 first because it's a little bit more normal. But you're going to circle your right angle. And then there's 2 sides that are perpendicular to each other. That is going to be your base and your height. The 2 perpendicular sides. So it's just 9.7 is your base times 5.2. And then you've got a choice. You either divide the whole thing by 2 or you multiply it by 0.5 or 1/2. And I'll do it this way. So remember, we talked about you can either do 0.5 or 1/2, whatever you choose. 9.7 times 5.2, you're going to get 25.22 centimeters squared. You could have also done the 1/2 thing. Oh gosh, what did I just do? 1/2. Oh my. It's all sorts of crazy. And see, you're getting the same answer. Doesn't matter. Okay, for this one, circle the right angle. Does this triangle look weird? Absolutely it looks weird. It's like, this is the area of this triangle, the yellow part. That's the area that we're looking for. Not this part over here. But the problem is you can't just multiply 8 and 5 or you're going to get it wrong. You have to find the sides that are perpendicular. So this height still has to be perpendicular even though you're not looking for this area right here. So the distance from here to here is 5. So 5 times 3.3 and then multiply that by 1/2, or you can divide it by 2. Like divide the whole thing because it's the same thing. So 0.5 times 5 times 3.3, you get 8.25. But I just wanted to show you that picture because it's different. All right, this part right here, we're actually going to focus on this mainly tomorrow, but I'm going to show you one example today, and then we'll do more of these types of examples tomorrow. Let's say it gives you the area, and you are searching for the length. So like this is your question mark or your X. So yeah, you like just work backwards. So instead of multiplying, well, I'll show you. So you've got A equals 1/2 base times height. There it is. So let's plug in all the things that we have. 29.25 equals 1/2 times 6.5, and then I'm going to put X because this is our base. This is our base. What is the length or the base? There, you know, it's the same thing. But I think it asks, on Delta Math, it asks what's the length, which is essentially what's the base. It may ask for either the height or the base, but you do it the same way. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. Go ahead and multiply 1/2 times 6.5. Or 6.5 times 0.5. And get that. Okay, so see what I did? Divided it by 2. Multiplied it by 1/2. It's the same thing. And then, just like Devon said, now we're going to divide. So instead of multiplying these two numbers, because we don't know what they are, we're going to divide by 3.25. Yeah, so just make sure this is a 29.25. I accidentally wrote 30. And then when you divide those two, you get 9 for the answer. Okay, so you're just working backwards. It's not overly complicated. All right, let's do the circle one, and then we're going to be done. So we're going to do area and circumference. Here's the two problems. We're going to answer in terms of pi and to the decimal. Okay, so for terms of pi, all you do is put the numbers in the calculator. So 5 squared is 25. So in terms of pi, it would be 25 pi, and then you're done. But let's say you want it to be in decimal. You have to then type that thing, 25 pi, into the calculator. Where is pi? Well, it's right here. So you have to click second. Oh, that's the wrong thing. That's mode. Second. And then the caret, the little arrow that points up. And then you'll get your pi. So 78.5 is the decimal. 25 pi is in terms of pi. It just depends on how it's asked. And then here, 2 times 5 is 10. So it's either 10 pi for the circumference or 10 times pi. What am I in? 10 times pi is 31.4. Okay, do we remember what circumference is versus area? Yeah, so the circumference is the perimeter of the circle. The area is the same as the area we've been learning before. For here, area of a semicircle, you need to first find the radius. So this gives you the diameter. But you ultimately just do pi times the radius squared, and then you divide it by 2. So this, or you could write it like this, pi 1/2 pi times 4 squared. Why? And all you're doing is just taking the area and dividing it by 2. You will need to know this when we get to, no, not today. It's like in a few days when we do composite figures and we do multiple figures put together. You may have to find half of a circle. And so, all right, in terms of pi, it would be 4 squared, which is 16, divided by 2. So it'd be 8 pi, or in decimal, it would be 8 times pi. Whoop. It doesn't like that, putting a plus on the end, does it? Oh my goodness, this is a struggle. Let's just retype it. 25.1, there we go. 8 pi, or 25.1. So same idea, terms of pi versus decimal.